But for now, though, we tell you about Africa's first international school leaving certificate. It's been given the stamp of approval. Nearly 400 candidates from neighboring countries sat for the examinations, and those results have been released today. To better understand the significance of this, we're joined by Professor Howie of the University of Stellenbosch Units for International Credentialing. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon, Prof. What do we need to know about what's different with this particular program?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this exciting news. So the difference really is that Africa has now showcased its first international qualification, and this has been released by the Independent Examinations Board here in South Africa. The important part here from Stellenbosch's point of view is that we've been instrumental in the external quality assuring of this school leaving certificate. What's important really to know is these almost 500 children that wrote this is really a milestone in terms of Africa really starting its, I would say, intellectual independence, and really looking forward in terms of young people increasing their opportunities globally whilst still keeping the local contextual relevance of the qualification. So it's a very exciting moment.
Tertiary or higher education, Prof?
This is a school leaving qualification, so it's the equivalent of grade 12. They have now written 32 subjects, and should the children receive the qualification with merit, it provides them with the opportunity to apply to universities all over the world, including in Southern Africa and in South Africa. That's right.
How did it work, and where were the candidates from? Which countries?
So the candidates were based in Namibia, Mozambique, and Eswatini, and 16 examination centers took part this year, and the examinations were run by the IEB International Division. So Stellenbosch University worked very closely with the IEB in terms of ensuring the quality of those papers that were written, and there were 52 different papers that were written by 489 candidates. So across these three countries, you had children in different schools who would have learned that new curriculum, the International Secondary Certificate Curriculum, and would be learning exciting new elements such as the active citizenry, which has quite a demanding curriculum associated with it.
You mentioned the benefit for the continent academically in positioning ourselves as holding our own, suggesting that this is international best practice?
Indeed, I think that is what, as quality assurers, Stellenbosch University, with its whole vision on the African partnerships and collaboration, is really focusing on very high quality in terms of the curriculum and assessment that are delivered in schools that are wishing to do this qualification. And by doing so, it really gives the opportunity for the development of young scholars, aspiring scholars who really want to go into universities right across the world. And for us, that's a key element of this African revival and strengthening and independence. And this qualification that has been offered seemingly presents learners with an alternative international qualification that is more locally to Africa, rooted in Africa, but also internationally credible, relevant, and important in showcasing African capabilities and knowledge, we think.
Yeah, we've always led the way and have been trailblazers where, I guess, education is concerned, with the first ever university coming from the continent. Before they get to the point where they sit down for the exams, just talk to us about what they would then go through for the entire year and what they're being taught about.
Right. So amongst these 32 subjects that the children would have been exposed to, so they obviously have the choice, as you would do in any other, let's say, grade 12 equivalent examination, bearing in mind that this qualification is considered comparable to England, Wales, Northern Ireland's GCE advanced subsidiary level, so the AS levels, or let's say Australia's senior secondary certificate of education. And looking at that, they would choose their subjects. And we had, for instance, children that did up to 12 subjects. We had one child who wrote 12 subjects, another wrote 11. So the choice is really in terms of whatever it is that they would like to aspire to. And if they're intending to go to university, then for this qualification, they would have had to choose, for instance, a primary language. So the language would have been, let's say, an equivalent to a home language here in South Africa that they would speak. So they would choose a language. They would choose often a second language to go with that. They would have to do a subject called active citizenry, and they would have to do at least 4 other subjects which would be merit-based, and they would have to achieve at least 50% in those subjects to be able to be considered for application to university. In addition to that, they would have done 2 other subjects too. So from the beginning of this year, they would have had a typical, let's say, grade 12 final year building on 2 former years, grade 10 and 11 equivalents of learning the curriculum. So taking the subjects that they've chosen, 7 subjects, as I say, some children chose 8, 9, even 12, and then working on those subjects throughout the year, as you would have done, let's say, in a high school here in South Africa.
Sure.
So the difference really is the international element in terms of doing an international qualification.
You mentioned the subject active citizenry twice. What is it about and why?
Well, it's considered very important for a number of reasons, and unlike, I think, other qualifications, this is really one that caught our attention when the IB put it forward. It's really about good citizenship, trying to develop active, interested, independent citizens. So there are a number of skills that go with it, and a number of knowledge components, including things like digital literacy, looking at problem solving, looking at citizenry, citizenship. So it's a subject which has got a combination of different knowledge bases which would be taught at the school, and then there are certain tasks which would then be assessed, let's say, at the school level. And the whole key point about this subject is about, it's not the academic subject in the traditional realm of others. For instance, you would take English primary language, for instance. There are some differences between it, but what's different in this qualification, I think, is that the weight that is being given to it. A child has to pass that subject in order to obtain their degree, their qualification. And I think that's quite a shift from other qualifications, including international qualifications.
Is this the way of the future in terms of learning?
We think so. Certainly that's one of the reasons I think Stellenbosch University, and in particular the Unit for International Credentialing, was drawn to this qualification. I think it's got many elements that are really quite visionary in the way that they approach knowledge, in the way that they assess knowledge. And it's very exciting to be, I think, part of an initiative which is looking towards solutions for current societal problems that we see around us. And just having this group of young people who can hold their own in an international environment is very exciting. The affordability element, I think, has been very important for those schools that may have wanted an international qualification, but who find some qualifications very expensive to afford. So this is providing an alternative, and I think is really putting Africa's voice into the international qualification space at the school leaving end. So the nexus between school and university, and that's very important.
I'm glad you brought out the affordability point, Prof, because I was thinking about higher education, but that doesn't apply here. Because in South Africa, if you want to, well, you go the private option, it's also very expensive. And so how accessible is this in terms of affordability?
I believe so. I believe it is a very affordable qualification. I mean, those details the IB would better speak to. But in terms of comparability of other international qualifications, it's far more affordable. And I think that that's one of the elements one has to look at in terms of carrying this African vision forward, in terms of wanting to have the African voice out there, to start to look at an independent intellectual agenda, which is, I think, what this qualification brings that is slightly different. And the continent needs that. We need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet and not to be dependent, I think, all the time on external forces, but collaborate and share and go into partnerships internationally. And I think that's where Stellenbosch University has been spending a lot of its effort in the last few years in particular.
100%. Do I get a chance if I want to go back?
Sounds also delicious. Absolutely. I'm sure the IB would welcome you with open arms to do that.
So we did mention that the results are out today. I know sometimes we obsess about whether there's 100% pass rate, but are you able to share how the learners fared?
Well, I had a sneak preview of the results, and I must say they're very, very impressive. I pointed out that 2 children, for instance, who did 11 and 12 subjects, but they were a large group of children. Most children, in fact, did 8 subjects. There was a large group who really performed exceptionally well. And I think what is very important is to see the very high percentage of children who qualify to be able to apply to university. So the media releases are out there, but the result, I think, is over 80% or more of the children have actually attained university entrance requirements, have met those requirements. So this qualification doesn't speak to pass or fail because it's very much the combination of subjects and meeting those with merit. But there are 2 children who have actually met the qualification for the ISC with an advanced level. And I think that is particularly important because that brings them, those 2 children who attained that brings them on a par with the advanced level, for instance, that is written by a qualification authority such as the Cambridge A-levels. So those children have every opportunity in the same way that those who would have got the UK advanced levels would. And I think that's very impressive. So those results are actually quite incredible. That this is an amazingly courageous cohort of schools and learners who've done this, who've opted for a new qualification. But I think the results borne out are, certainly support their achievements. Yeah.
Yeah, very beautiful work, and congratulations to them. We are, the youngest continent in terms of the youth population. So if we're going to send them out there, send them with that Africa agenda. Thank you very much to Professor Sarah Howie of the University of Stellenbosch's Unit for International Credentialing.